ask you before we start, since we're starting, so why are you here at this workshop? What do you really want to get out of it? Take a moment and think. What do you really want to get out of this workshop? And that's what we'll do. But just write it down on a piece of paper so it's not just the first thing that comes to your mind, but it's the best thing that comes to your mind. I do a lot of, this is my teaching style. I ask the students to write. So since it's a small group, I call this a small group, what I just ask is for everybody to think about what they want to get out of this session. Why did they come to this session on the first day of class? And I mean, I have a plan I can do, but I'd rather just do what really you feel the need for. So I saw your hand go up first. We'll do what I call as a brainstorming, which is for everybody, a brainstorm means you put out your ideas and there's no crosstalk. You can sort of say, yes, that's what I want to, and I'll put a check mark next to it. But, and you can say more than one thing, but let's give other people, everybody a chance, all right? So let's just start here.
Okay, so my main thing that I want to be able to do is set a tone for a classroom where they feel safe to express themselves, but not too comfortable, like they're going to be challenged. And at the same time, set a tone for their relationship to me, where I'm approachable and someone they can feel comfortable talking to, but not too, not as introvert.
Okay. Great. Who else has something?
So I've already seen this in some of the correspondence I've had with some of the students, and I'm teaching AUX this fall, and a lot of the correspondence is, I hope I've answered this right. Is this the right way to do it? And I'd like to set the tone that with learning, sometimes there is obviously you have to follow a certain model, but sometimes there's not always a right answer. It's about learning how to think critically and work through. Am I articulating that well?
Yes, yes. I'm just trying to put it in just a few words. So it's about an expectation of learning and role of the faculty member. Maybe? Does that capture it?
Yeah, and maybe right answers and quotes.
Okay, what else would you like to get out of this session?
Personally, I'm trying to strike the balance between reviewing the need to know the class while also creating an environment for introduction and just warmth for throughout the semester.
So it's about covering material and
while also keeping it personal.
Okay. Who else has something that they would, even if it's completely different from this kind of list? I was thinking maybe how do you do introductions? That's something. Would anyone be interested in looking? Okay, yeah. So it's like, how do you do the introductions? Okay. Anybody else? What would you, Pat?
Like time management, and in lesson planning, kind of knowing how long something will take, and then adhering to that or planning for contingencies. If, say, intros run over.
So I'll answer that one for now, which is it's only through experience, and you're going to mess up. And I'm the really last person you should ask about time management because I think everything's really interesting and we got to talk about it, and then I'm like, oh, we're there. So what I would say is just being really conscious of it and set for yourself some parameters about we're going to have 15 minutes to discuss this, but then don't worry about it, and next time you'll do better. And the other thing is to let go of this idea that's so just gets in the way of learning, which is this idea is I have to cover this material. As long as if you start, if we start thinking about, okay, I gotta cover this material, which we do. We have certain material we have to cover. But there's, think about different ways to cover the material so that you can do some other things. All right, anything else for this session, which was about how to create an environment for learning on the first day?
Sure, so I would just say, probably other people here also have a block class, so I have 3 hours on the first day, and I want to use that whole time because I know that our time is limited, and so I fully plan to use that whole time, but I am, trying to think of ways to make it so that we launch into activities that will make them really excited for the class and engage in interesting discussion, even though you're really throwing people into the water on the first day.
So it's an activities with content.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think that's extremely important on the first day of class.
And sort of related to that, what I always wish I had done by the end of my first day of class is make it really clear what students can expect on like a day-to-day basis in the class. Like how am I going to be interacting with them every day? How are they going to be interacting with each other? Because if I try something where, all of a sudden on day 2 they're talking or day like 6, where they're talking in small groups and they're like, what, we've never done anything like this before, then I feel like I've let them down on day 1 by not saying that these are you can expect this type of variety, if that makes sense.
It does. I'm not. Yeah, Erica.
I mean, I think that part of that is what I was thinking. I kind of categorized it as like class calibration or branding me and the class, like giving them a little bit of a teaser, giving them an idea of what to expect, creating that tone, all of the above for me. But I want them to at the end of the week, call their family members or tell their roommate, I'm really excited about this class.
Mm-hmm. So yes, we all want that.
Oh man, it can't just be my class.
No, it's mine. It's only my class, right? And they're going to do my reading, not yours. Okay, because all students tree up. No, so anyone else have anything? Yes.
I think one for me, just thinking back when I was a student, I want to make sure that this class isn't a waste of time. So how can I make it valuable for the student that they're not going to think, why am I in this class? Especially if it's a required class. How can I make their time worth it?
Okay. So
not only with the class, I was going to say with the first session too. I think sometimes students expect I'm going to show up, get the syllabus, and have the rest of the afternoon off. Mm-hmm. And so I want to make it clear from the get-go that we're spending the whole 3 hours together.
Okay. So I'm going to think about this for a second. But first what I want to do is just a little bit of introduction so that we are not, so I'm just not going to be so wedded to all these notes I have here, which is fine. There's some of it, so my goal, I have to tell you what my goals are. I did this morning. Why do I do this? Why am I telling you what the goals for the session are?
Evaluation.
Because it's on the evaluation. So for those of you who've never taught before, there's actually an evaluation, a student evaluation that's much longer than this. And so I recommend that you go look it up. It's online on the myamerican.edu, and CTRL will help you get there if you need help with that. So my goal for today is to help you set the tone so that on the first day of class, this is really, I can't deal with the entire semester, but on the first day of class, that your students have a sense that this is going to be a great class and it's going to be about engagement, right? And that it's a positive learning experience. And so that's my goal for today. And so what we're going to do is start by, while we are introducing ourselves, one of the things I have to do, so let's see how I was going to. This is about learning how to think on your feet, right? If you're just starting teaching, don't try this, right? Don't try this at home yet. It's harder but sometimes it's actually necessary. Actually, I shouldn't have said that. If you're new to teaching and you feel confident, you look and say, wait, I had something planned for today and nobody did the reading, so that's not going to work, so we're going to do something else. So that's actually really important. so my focus is really on the first day of class. Okay, that's what this workshop is about. It's not on everything. I put a bunch of handouts on Blackboard under this session. You can look them up. And I've handed 2 things out that were focused really just on the first day of class. I was planning on focusing mostly on exercises, activities, and introductions. But I will talk about some of the other ways to do this. I'll give you, the first answer to a lot of these questions is modeling. You can say you're going to be exciting, you're going to learn really important things in this class. It's not going to work. You have to model it and show them. You have to show, it means what it means, you have to pick readings, course topics that are important and exciting. One of the ways you can get students to do the reading and come prepared and do your reading and not mine is because you picked an interesting, relevant topic and readings. So you got to Monday, and so you can still, revise as necessary. So the other thing, so that is as far as being approachable but not a pushover. It's the same kind of thing, which is about setting boundaries. It's about having course policies that are firm. I did a workshop this morning on course policies, and you can look on the Blackboard site for that, about setting course policies that are explicit and firm, and setting boundaries, while also being approachable. So what it was, so let's just, and then about feeling safe to express themselves but being challenged again, it's about modeling. It's about not making mistakes, which is going to happen, which are where you do some microaggression, and that means you're just going to have to work through some of that. That's a long-term process. So I can't answer. I'm happy to meet with you one-on-one, but that's really about. It's the first day of class, and it's every day. You listen to what people say. When someone says something, you're not doing something else. So you're actually listening, and you repeat, or you say, "That's a really good point. Who wants to build on what she just said?" And you use your name. Learning names is very important, as Chris Palmer just taught us. So it's about respecting people and everybody, because if it's not everybody, then you get accused of having favorites. And I tell students, I have favorites. It's whoever does the reading. It's a true statement. And they interpret that as I just have favorites, and I'm like, no, it's whoever really did the reading and digs in. So, again, the question of, I'm sort of going to just give a real quick answers to some of these about the expectations of learning of a faculty member and right answers. Again, it's about modeling. So there are times when there are right answers. You, in AUX, which is what you're teaching, how many of you are teaching in AUX? Okay, that's a different challenge. That's about where students are learning, the first year students are learning like time management and how to deal with office hours and all the sort of habits of mind and things that skills they need to be a successful student. As much as possible, what I would say to that is have open conversations and creating this space where every voice can be heard. And that means giving people a chance to write it down before they say it aloud, because not everyone thinks on their feet, like I just modeled for you. And so it wasn't, and so that it's a way to, when there are right answers, you say there's a right answer that we need to get to here. But if there's no right answer, we can evaluate what are the strengths and weaknesses of that argument. What are the strengths and weaknesses of, say, let's play that out. What if we did it that way? How but in AUX, I think it's got to be experiential. everything to me in AUX has to be, and we can talk about that. So it means role playing and simulate, more role playing, have the students talk to each other, that kind of thing. All right. Does that answer some of it? That's sort of my take. Who would like, on those questions that I just raised, who would like to add to those that conversation? What advice would you give to those people who asked those questions?
Seems like figuring out what needs modeling is just is another trial and error sort of process. Like coming in with what are the things that I expect students to want to be. What are the things that I'm not sure students will have the experience of engaging in the classroom environment with, and what are the things that I think we can just sort of let develop over the course of the entire semester. That seems to be a big issue on day one for me, is what are the things that I need to set the tone for right away, and then what are the things that just need that time to really be developed over the course of 15 weeks.
Can you give me an example?
I think, because I think of when, so let's say, for example, like teaching students about careful citation and the whole academic integrity code and all those things like that. I feel like on the first day there's so much to cover and they're getting so much information about policies and all those kinds of things. So I'm not going to cover that the first day.
Absolutely.
Especially because nothing's due on the first day. And so, that might be something that I plan for class 3 or 4 or something.
So, so absolutely, students are on a need-to-know basis, right? You can talk about, I don't talk about the research paper on the first day of class. I don't give that detail because they're not listening. So I don't even, so this is where it's sort of more back to my notes. So I thought you were talking about more like class behaviors.
Well,
that's why I was trying to get a sense of what you're.
It's more like, what are the types of everyday assignments that you're going to be preparing? What might the type of questions you'd be expected to answer on a daily basis look like? As opposed.
So some of that I would say is you don't have to give them. So let's think of it this way. It took you how many years to master the material that you're going to teach in 14 weeks? How many years did it take you to master?
More than.
And how
more
many?
Than weeks in a semester.
And how long did it take you to put the syllabus together and find all those readings? If you put all that information into their space in one day, and even in like a 20-minute period, you go over the whole syllabus, all you get is them shutting down because they feel so overwhelmed. I've seen it. So I no longer go over the syllabus on the first day. I do not recommend going over the whole syllabus. Now so think about on the first day of class. So let's say, let me try and answer. Can I answer some of these questions maybe by saying what I do on the first day of class? Mm-hmm. So I used to go over the whole syllabus, and then I just watched them just deflate. And so now I just point out, I hand it out, and I point out a few things. The first thing I do is I say, we're going to take the entire class period, so be prepared. I know some of you are used to being, I don't even say that. I never say, it's a beautiful day out here, thank you for being here. Okay, because where's your head? Right? And I don't say, I know some of you are going to be let go in other classes, because then what are they doing? They're thinking about, why aren't I being let go? So I only say what I'm doing. We're here today to learn about each other. We're here to learn, to set the stage for what we're going to do for the next 14 weeks. I'm very excited about being here. I look forward to learning with you, and I've prepared for you. I sort of do, don't. Like if you watch Chopped, and I'll say that. Watch what I've done to prepare for you today, right? Okay, so already you're laughing, right? Now I've gotten you because anytime you can use any kind of reference to anything that's not academic, right? You know, when we do, I use examples of they borrow, you know, you borrowed your parents' car. That you use, I use that to teach about other principles in political science, right? Whatever it is that makes sense to them. So I will go over mostly sort of my teaching philosophy and kind of socializing them to my classroom. We'll be doing different things and different, you know, you don't have to say there are going to be different kinds of questions, you know, that these are the questions we're going to deal with in these 14 weeks. But that there'll be different kinds of exercises we're doing. Sometimes there's lecture, whatever it is you do. You should expect the first half hour will be lecture, then we do a discussion. You should expect you will get reading questions a week in advance on Blackboard, and then I do in-class writing assignments. And one of those in-class writing, the in-class writing assignment will be one of those reading questions I gave you. Because I'm here not to trick you or quiz you, I'm here to teach you. And studies show that the more you are, as the study by it's called Making It Stick, the more that you are tested, the more that you remember things. So I've set my intention that this is not going to be an easy class. I'm going to expect them to do the reading. If you don't expect them to do the reading, if you're going to hand out PowerPoint slides and they just have to kind of memorize those PowerPoint slides, that's what they should be expected for. There are faculty who ask them on the first day of class, what are your interests on this topic? And then they will adjust the syllabus. Okay, don't ask them that if you're not going to adjust the syllabus. I don't ask them that because I'm not adjusting the syllabus. So think about, so I talk about this is how we have class discussion. This is what I expect out of participation. And I have a rubric on participation. And I did it in my first session today. So if I can send that out, if any, I can put it on our Blackboard site, which is, so it's about listening, preparation, moving the conversation forward, quality of contributions. It's only last is frequency. So I try to set the tone of what my learning community looks like, okay? And there are, I go over certain policies, but more and more I'm putting that in writing because students won't remember it. They've got, if they're an undergraduate, they have 5 bosses. They're not going to remember it unless I put it in writing for them. So I might do a handout of what, or I put it on the syllabus for sure. There are faculty who have a quiz on the syllabus. And the student, you have asked questions. What is my late penalty policy? What is my laptop policy? When are the papers due? And they have to hand that in by the next class. So there is a way to, quote, cover the material without going through everything. I have a colleague who was teaching about the European Union. She put a photo she had taken in Europe up on the board, slide, that she had up there. And then she said, what do you see in this photo? And she said 80% of the course material was covered by them talking about that photo. So think about ways you can do that, okay? So what I do spend a lot of the time, oh, one other thing, and then I'm going to do introductions, which we've never gotten to. You never use the roster to call the roll. Why? Because if we have transgender students, you've just outed them. They no longer go by Christian, they're now Christine. So I let them introduce themselves. And I use a student information sheet, which I've posted to Blackboard. I recommend that you have some sort of questionnaire or student information sheet. in which it includes, for example, their personal pronouns. You don't say preferred pronouns, that's a microaggression. You say personal pronouns, what are the and it's in the information sheet, rather than asking people to go around the room and say it. If there's anything that is, gender nonconforming, then you address that and say, so then you'd look at, so when, let's say you identify as he, just use you as an example, and so when I said, well, and then I would just model it in class. Well, as he was saying, and I just sort of use it. But the CDI people, I don't know if anyone else has more experience with the personal pronouns. Christine, you want to add anything?
I think what you're saying sounds right.
Okay.
Based on what I've learned and what I try to do.
The Center for Diversity and Inclusion has more information on it on their website. Okay.
So, so I guess my question is, what if I was planning on, I appreciate you talking about this because I've been talking and thinking about this a lot. I was planning on just asking people during the first day, but you think that that would make the students uncomfortable. But then the other classmates will still use, what if they use the incorrect pronouns as a result?
Christine.
You could do it in the introductions and say, class, as we introduce ourselves, please state your name, your pronouns, and your major, or whatever piece of information you want them to share. And our students, I will say, most of our undergraduate students will not be surprised by that question at all. For example, last night at the opening ceremony of our Explore DC First Year Service Program, the student body president, all the student coordinators who got up to speak, each one of them said, "Hi, my name is Christine, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm here to tell you about X, Y, and Z." So it's very commonplace for our students. They're not at all surprised by this, unless they just showed up on campus and haven't engaged. So I think in your introduction, if you just had people self-identify, rather than saying, tell me what you're, like specifically, like, Jane, what are your...
Right, if you just make it part of the introduction.
Right, and everybody has to do it.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Sure.
So let us introduce ourselves and then maybe talk about how we might do introductions, if you will. Is that okay? And then the only other thing I want to say about that I have is, in terms of covering course content, what I do is I talk about what excites me about the content, what excites me about the readings. I'm so excited I found this reading on blah blah, because as they're a practitioner, or we get the military perspective on that. We don't often get the military's perspective on that, or whatever it is. So, but it's throughout, it's not every single reading. It's not every single thing.
So I'm going to tag on to that and address this class is not a waste of time by giving an introduction activity that I do. I teach some gen eds, and what I do is there's some majors in the class and some people just taking the gen ed. And so I say, can you tell me your name, major pronouns, that kind of stuff, and also why you're taking this. And you can't say because I'm required to. And so I think it helps them to identify, oh, this is important to me because I'm interested in, teaching elementary school, and there's maybe some information that I'm going to learn about kids in here, or I'm interested in marketing and there's motivation stuff in here. So I hope it sort of pulls something out, and if they can't figure it out, I crowdsource. What are you interested in? What are your hobbies? How could this relate to our class content? I'm sorry, Betsy, I'm giving you.
No, you're giving us ideas for introductions. All right, so why taking this course, and how it relates to
your interest, to your other majors, what excites you, having them sort of identify it.
To major or interests, asking them what excites them runs the risk of them saying, I'm in here because I have to be.
And then I say, can't answer it.
All right. Okay, that's great. So let's first introduce ourselves, all right? I'm 25 minutes into this here, and I'm woefully late, but that's okay, we're still here. And I was just gonna do something like your name, your department or unit, and the years you've been teaching total, and that includes at AU, and that means when you were the only instructor in the course, not when you were like an assistant, but even if you were a graduate student and you had your own course. So can we start at one corner?
I'll start. My name is Gina Ledpitcher. I'm in the philosophy department and I've taught for 2 years.
My name is Megan Brew. I am in the Cobalt School of Business, and this will be my first class.
My name is Amy Yu, and I also am teaching class in Cobalt my first year.
My name is Naomi Boland, and I'll be in the School of International Service in the Intercultural International Communication Department. I taught at the K-12 level for 6 years, and I've been teaching at the university level for 7. But this is my first time at AU.
My name is Marisa Isor. I'll be in the School of International Service as well. This is my 15th year teaching, and it's my first one here.
My name is Hongwei, from biology department. Before EU, I have about 7 years teaching experience, and I've been with EU about 2.5 years. Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Marina Shaw. I am with the World Languages and Cultures Department, and I've been teaching for 21 years, including 9 years at EU.
My name is Valentina. I'm in the Department of Environmental Science, and I taught for 1 semester. I just started at the EU.
My name is Nathan Bluestein. I am in the Department of Performing Arts in the musical theater program, and I've taught for 2 years, and this is my first year at AU.
My name is Nika Elder. I'm in the art history department. I've been teaching for 5 years, and this is my first year at AU.
Laura Stepanek, biology department. I have been teaching for 3 years at AU.
I'm Robert Aceituno. I've been teaching on and off probably about 5 to 10 years, and this is my first semester at AU.
And what unit?
The Department of Accounting and Taxation, School of Business.
Hi, I'm Patty Park. I'm in the Department of Literature, in the MFA in Creative Writing, and I've taught for about 2 years.
Hi, my name is Paul Valeri. I'm in the Department of Literature, and I've taught for 1 year already, and I'm new to AU.
I'm Nathan Krogan. I'm in the Department of Biology, and I've taught for 4 years now, all at AU.
Hello, Erica Hart from Psychology. I've taught for 5-ish years.
I'm Brianna Hempel. I'm also in the Department of Psychology, and I've taught for 1 semester.
Hi everyone, my name is Christine Getting, and I will be teaching AUX in the School of Ed for the first time this fall, but I have directed our Global Experiential Learning Program, the Alternative Breaks Program at American University 3 years now, and I work with a cohort of students and guide them and teach them through the year on developing their programs.
Okay. So, and I'm Betsy Cohn in the School of International Service. I teach U.S. foreign policy, and I've been here since 2006, but I've been teaching since 1995. So it's 22 years, something like that. So let me tell you, and I'm also the SAS faculty coordinator for teaching and student learning, and I do a lot of teaching workshops. So when I do introductions in the classroom, I try to set the tone that I'm not the only one who has to learn their names, right? Learn names. So what we do is I do 4 people at a time. So we'll test ourselves. What's her name? Gina. Megan, Annie, Naomi. Okay? So, I'll just do that. So it's like the person, I say to them, we all have to learn names. I'm taking notes. You might want to too. And some of them do. Okay? So I didn't do that now because we're not going to see each other again except across campus when we give each other hugs and say, how's it going? Okay? But but what happens is, so they go like, Gina, Megan, Annie, Naomi, and I go, that was pathetic. So on something that's so low-hanging fruit that really doesn't matter, I tell them, they get on notice that I've called them out, which is that if they're not, I had said, well, you got to know the names, and so everybody laughs, and I say, I'm very serious about this. Let's try it again.
Gina.
Megan.
Naomi.
Better. Let's try it again.
Gina. Megan. Annie. Naomi.
See that? See what that did? It's just a very simple thing about setting a tone that says, I mean it. When I say we all have to learn each other, we're all going to talk and refer to each other by name in here. And I do it every 4 people, and I have to put a little dash next, so then we get the next 4. So then we've got Marissa, Han, did I say that right? Han, and Marina, and Valentina, right? So, but we just keep, and then at the very end, it's all right, we got to do it all, we just do 4 at a time, but then we have to all do it until we all say it with feeling, right? And I'm like, so I get to call them out and call them that's what I mean by model. So that sort of gives an example of what I mean by model. If you want them to learn each other's names, then you got to tell them, like you have to treat that as a serious thing. If you don't care, that's fine. Don't teach them how to do something unless you want them to do it. Valentina.
About name. So how do you everybody ask the students to call you? Because it's
Professor.
Professor. Okay.
That is the way it's done at American University.
Okay.
At my previous institution, people called the professor by the first name.
Okay. Because I've already noticed that people take me for students around me. I have a little backpack and so that I was wondering if I had to set it up with that term. Okay.
Absolutely, and that gets to this question you have about being approachable, and so you have to own it, and that just comes in. So maybe
No shorts.
no shorts, and maybe you want to
Get a bag.
get a briefcase. I have a leather briefcase you can have.
I went through it, yeah. But I also use it for the interview and then
Yes.
Okay.
And for women in particular, and women who look young. Absolutely.
Does anyone go by doctor on campus? Or I've heard both, so I'm just.
Yes,
yeah.
or you go by doctor. And you should, say that to your students at the beginning of class. So it's really, I look forward to this semester. My name is Professor Cohn. And I just say, you just said it. You don't have to say, you should call me this. I've just modeled it.
Can you sign your emails too, Professor Cohn?
Absolutely, Professor Cohn. I'm in touch with former students who've been out 8 years. They still, I tried to get them to call me Betsy, and they still call me Professor.
I just had a question on the introductions, because I've been to the past trainings, and it's kind of mixed reviews on note cards for introductions instead of.
What do you mean by note cards?
So, like, instead of the student getting up and introducing themselves and saying their name, they're actually writing it all down, and then the professor collects it. And
so so let's brainstorm some ways to do it. I definitely hand out a student information sheet. That's for me. And I gave you an example. So in a class on transitional justice, I asked, or whatever the topic is, I want to know, what courses have you taken on foreign policy? What experience do you have? So that I know this student has done 3 internships, and blah, 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 and this one has no experience. I think about what information you want from them to help them so that you can teach them appropriately, so that they can learn and you can have a certain expectation. right? If you're teaching languages and they've studied abroad or whatever, so that's one thing. I definitely do a student information sheet. To me, it also includes, and I posted it on Blackboard, I think, but it will if I haven't. I think I did. I also ask what your career goals are. Why? Because I want them to think about that. Because I want them to think, how does this course contribute to their career goals? I ask, and I say top 3, and you can change your mind as soon as you walk out the door. I ask, what helps you learn? Because I want to know. If I have a whole bunch of students, now, you got to be careful with that. If they all say, I absolutely need PowerPoint, and I don't use PowerPoint, I then have to decide, am I going to use PowerPoint? But what I will do is, if I find out that they're much more visual learners, I'm going to put a lot more on the board. And I also ask, are they in any of the honors programs, Global Scholars, or whatever? So again, I can evaluate. If they're going through the accelerated 3-year program, right? Also, our rosters in Blackboard do not say what year they are, which is insane. So I asked and now I realize I should probably ask, how many credits do you have? But it's very confusing. So, and if you have students from different schools, you might want to ask, what school are you from? Okay? So think about whatever information you would need that would help you know who your student is to better help them learn. Okay? Nathan?
I'm ripping this off from the previous instructor who lent me her syllabus. There's a student on her student information sheet, and it's possible she got it from one of the CTRL sessions.
Right.
One of the questions that she has is not how do you best learn in class, but something that takes professors forever, or instructors forever to figure out about, or to learn about me as a student is blank.
Right.
And it gets students in that mind frame of, well, what's happened like every semester that I've been here, where by the end of it I'm thinking, God, why didn't they ever get this about me?
Right. That's a great question.
Yeah. As soon as I saw that, I absolutely stole it.
Say it again.
The thing that takes professors forever, my instructors forever to learn about me, or a long time to learn about me.
So what I spend half the class and the first day of class doing is introductions. And it's a way to get people comfortable. And I ask them one question, which is, what will help us remember who you are? And I say, this is not a brag session. I once had a student say, my name is Whitney and I'm from Houston. It's a true statement. And I still remember where she sat in the class.
That's cute.
Okay? So it can be whatever. And I always give the question as soon as, and I put it on the board as soon as I walk in. Because people will start thinking. The other thing is, in an upper level class, I teach on transitional justice as a senior capstone. I ask them, the whole class is about being wronged and wrongdoing. I say, think of one example where you were wronged and what happened, and one example where you wronged somebody, and and what happened. And that's a very high risk introduction, but it's very powerful. So think about maybe something to sometimes they'll ask on a course on Latin America, give us your favorite thing about Latin America, or something like that. So it's course related. You can also do course related. So the other thing I do is I get rid of the low-hanging fruit first. I ask everybody, raise your hand if you're an SIS major. Look around. Raise your hand if you're, live on campus. Raise your, or whatever it is. How many first-year students? Second, third, fourth, right? So that it's, because think of it, if you just introduce yourselves, my name, my name is Megan, and I'm a sophomore. You're all going to blend together. You're all going to be Megans and sophomores, as far, all the females at least will be Megans and sophomores. There's just nothing really there to hold on to. So I try to get that, and who studied abroad? Where did you study abroad? And then I say, I hate you because I really just was stuck here. Like, I don't get to go anywhere. Question or comment?
One of the classes I'm teaching is in a group where there are a lot of majors in the same cohort that know each other after 3 years of being in the same cohort, and I'm new to the program. Do you have any suggestions for intro?
So what are some suggestions for Nathan?
I would tell it about introduce the person sitting next to you. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I like that.
Or high risk, if it's really a tight cohort,
yeah.
Tell us something that most of the people in this room don't already know about you. If you want to push them, it depends on how, the classic thing would be have the person, you have to introduce someone else in the room. There's advantages to that because it is listening. And it's not about showboating. Theater majors we think are going to be showboating.
No.
or since theater is about you have to practice and do things over and over again, give us one example where you failed miserably. You don't like that? That's right. But that's what do you have to teach a person? Think about what you need theater majors to learn.
Theater majors love talking about times where they messed up. but then they follow it up with a time that they did something really awesome.
So think about what it is you want them to learn.
Yeah.
Think about what it is you want them, what kind of, you wouldn't ask a group of people who don't know each other.
Right.
When was the best, what's your best failure?
You can also do that anonymously. I do this with students in the alternative break program in the beginning, where I have them write down on index cards their hopes for the program and their fears for the program, and then I collect them and I read them aloud. Because then you're not assigning it to like, Mary's really afraid about doing this.
Right.
And they're hearing, oh, that person too is thinking that, and no one knows who said it. So that's helpful, I think. And like that might be like a tweak, so it's not.
It's not an either or. I think that's an and.
Yeah.
That's a great idea in terms of who we are as a group.
Maybe like asking students to write that down on day one, and then contacting them saying, is it okay if we share like a generalized version of this on day two, to say these are the sorts of things that a lot of you were concerned about coming into this class.
Yeah, I don't know. I would recommend just saying you're going to share.
Yeah.
And it's up to them to decide whether they want to put it on a piece of paper. There's at some point, it's great to get permission, but at some point you're in charge.
Yeah.
And so you have to, so that's the other thing. Stephen Brookfield, I recommend to you anything written that Stephen Brookfield has written. And he has a discussion, he has a questionnaire that he has on his website. Stephen Brookfield. It's F-I-E-L-D. And I heard him speak, he's written many books on teaching. And he said, the first day of class, I went up there and I talked to them and said, I'm so glad to be here, that we can all learn together. I'm here to learn from you as much as I know that, you're here to learn from me. And he thought he was really being like cool and approachable. And he found out, and he has a ticket out the door, which is what's one moment where you felt most distanced as a learner and where you felt most supported as a learner. And what he got on the feedback on that one was, well, if you're going to be learning from me, why are they paying you to be the professor? And I'm like, oh yeah, because I used to say that too. I can see how the student, you're there. They've paid a lot of money. They're there for you to guide them through a learning process. So it's about, and if you're new, you're gonna mess up. And it's about being authentic. But you were hired because you know your stuff. And so it's about owning that and saying when you don't know. It's very important to be authentic in that sense. As Chris Palmer was talking about last session, if you don't know something, then say, that's a really great question. I don't know. I'm going to get back to you. And then you better make sure to get back to them. And you look it up. Because there you are still the teacher. You're still the authority. And you have, but you can't say that every class, hopefully. But if you're going to do active learning, that opens up that space for a lot of questions. All right. So, yes?
I was going to say real quick, a pitfall that's happened to me in introductions that I think is just like, was completely unintentional on my part was some kind of question that could end up creating different statuses in the class. So I was teaching in a class, Human Rights in Africa. And so I started off by asking them, like, where have you traveled? Just broadly, you know? And some people were like, well, one guy was like, I used to run a human rights NGO in South Africa for 10 years, you know, and so he should have been taking the class, but he should have been teaching the class. And then there were other students that never left the United States. And they all, I feel like that set up something at the very beginning of the class where some of the students said something like, they're like, well, I just don't have anything to share. Like, that guy knows so much, I don't know anything. And so I think I changed that question the next time I taught the class to just like, where's somewhere that you'd like to travel, or so those still related to international issues, but didn't allow for that kind of ranking. And it's hard to know sometimes what questions will produce that kind of ranking, but that was a pitfall.
It's a really good point. Christina's shaking her head. Yes, you want to say something to that?
I think that's a really, really good point. And I mean, I think a lot of especially with our student demographics, particularly if you're new here, I would highly recommend, if there's another opportunity where CTRL is offering the course, who are our students and where, who's on our campus about our first year students, that hits on that really, really well, because a lot of our students come from backgrounds where they're Pell eligible students, they're from high need families, and so that, and that was, I think, an honest, and you clearly learned from it. So and we've all had those moments, but that's a really good way to sort of educate yourself of where our students are coming from, is to try to get that information, just to read the quick data points on that.
Can I ask you how does everything you said, how does it differ, or if it does, between undergraduate, like freshmen, or advanced undergraduate or master's students? Does it differ at all?
I'd say a little bit, but not really. The freshmen are dealing with so much in terms of the adjustment. How many of you are teaching first year students?
I don't know, because it doesn't say on the roster.
Yeah, so yes. Yeah.
Well, what level class is it?
I think it could be freshmen or sophomores. It's a 140.
Oh, 140?
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah. My recommendation is whatever you plan for your syllabus, cut 40% out. 40%? 1/4. I'm sorry. Cut 1/4 out. Cut 1/4. Cut 25% out of it. Cut 25% out of it.
Assignments?
Everything. It just takes so much more time to work through with them, to get them to understand and think about the skills. If you want I've really changed my teaching. This is way beyond the first day of class, this workshop. But I've really altered my teaching at this point, where if I expect them to demonstrate a skill, I spend time teaching them the skill. And so I have what I call learning tips, and this goes back to some of the earlier questions. I have learning tips, a different one in every class for the freshman seminar, the first year seminar. So how to read a text, how to develop a thesis, time management. I mean, thank God AUX is going to start dealing with this, but I give a handout on writing tips. And I say, if any of these mistakes are on your paper, it will be docked. But without saying that, I cannot expect that. I can't evaluate them at this point. We just have students of very different, varied levels of preparation for school. So we do, I mean, but I had seniors in a senior seminar a year ago who were still writing the 5-paragraph essay. It was a 2,000-word assignment. And in 2,000 words, they're writing 5 paragraphs. Because that's what they're taught in high school. I had 4 of them. It was terrifying. Does everyone know this, that in high school the students are taught an essay is 5 paragraphs? Always. Always. This is what they teach them. This is why the American educational system is in trouble.
Must have changed. I never learned that. There was like 3 to 5 paragraphs and like all this other stuff. Not this. That would have been easier in high school. But.
That's it. That's the 5-paragraph essay.
Yeah.
Intro, conclusion, that's 2 paragraphs, and 3 paragraphs are the handbook. So the answer is, at this point, I do a lot more in terms of teaching and being very explicit. So, okay. I want to get to, so there are other things you can do for introductions. We were going to do a brainstorming, but I'm going to just give you some ideas. So each student prepares a PowerPoint slide in advance about themselves, and then the professor goes over a few at the beginning of each class until everyone has introduced themselves. And it can be posted to Blackboard so everyone can look at them outside of class and they can learn about each other. There's the pair up. You introduce your partner after interviewing each other for 5 minutes. There's pair up, find 5 or 10 things you have in common. And it can't be a physical characteristic such as head, legs, and clothing. And post it on the board and find the common elements in the class. With large classes, you can use Top Hat or clickers to ask questions and post answers on the board so the class gets a collective sense of who you are. Ask students to mention one strength that they bring to the classroom. Risk-taking would be one area that they still need to work on. Much lower would be state your favorite food. State one adjective that best describes you. 2 truths and a lie. Play that game. Something you like about yourself. That one, believe it or not, is trickier than it sounds. We have students who don't like anything about themselves. So that could be hard. Play bingo and find a student who has X characteristic. Okay? So there's team building exercises, things like that as well. I want to talk more about how many of you teach block classes? Block classes, 2.5-hour classes. I think it's very important to use some of that time for content, okay? If you can create either some kind of exercise that's not busy work, but lays the foundation for something you're going to do. And I'll just give you the example of what I do in, before I do that, before other exercises, I handed out to you something I created with the help of a colleague. This handout. First day of class. You can read it later. But what I did was, I went through all the readings and I picked out quotes. And then I made them into a Word document. I cut it up so that each quote was one piece of paper, one little slip of paper, and I handed them out to everybody in the class. I break them up into groups of 4. Put them in those groups of 4 and say you have 20 minutes to read and ask as many questions as possible about the quotes. What this did was create the climate for learning that I want, which is asking questions, recognizing that they don't know all the answers, and that's okay. Then they reported back to the group, and I didn't answer each question. I'd say, that's a great question. We're going to discuss that in week 4. Great question. That's what we're doing when we just read Machiavelli. Great question. You know, and it went from there. So it was getting buy-in for the course content without it coming from me. And then the end, it was actually quite cute. They would, when they read that material, they was like, oh, that's my quote. I know. I thought it was really, I had no idea that that was going to happen. So I become more the facilitator. And I gave you an example on how to do that. Other things, this is faculty focus. Faculty focus is my favorite teaching blog. This is, they have several. You can go to faculty focus and just click on, you know, just search first day of class. Look at first day graffiti. So you can put charts around the room. You can put these, you know, white pieces of paper. I learned best in classes where the teacher, blah, blah. And most likely to participate in classes when, right? So that, then you then have a whole listing of information of how the class can best learn. So the rest of that you can read later. All right. Here's what I do in a course. I teach a class that's about democracy. Have you ever played the game in an exercise, Shipwrecked? You ever heard this exercise? So on the first day of class, it's a block class, I give them this piece of paper. I break them up into 4 groups. This isn't going to work for you unless you're teaching about democracy. But I want you to use it as an example, so I'm going to go through it quickly. Think about how you could apply this to what you're teaching. The scenario is you and 200 people, adults and children, have been shipwrecked on an island. No possibility of rescue. Captain and crew didn't survive. Just the passengers are left, you. What are you going to do? How are you going to survive? Number 1, will you form some sort of organization? If no, skip to question 5. Number 2, if yes, what form will it take? Number 3, what will be the tasks of the organization? 4, how will decisions be made? 5, what will you do to address long-term concerns? If you do not form an organization, explain why. If you do not form an organization, what's going to happen to the group? Do you see how this is? It's just their gut feelings before they've read anything. But it's basically what they think about democracy. And I always get, like, we have to have New England town hall meetings, and it's participatory democracy. I get no organization. I get some libertarians in there. Government's evil. And I always do, you know, I do this, and it lines up with the chapter, the first chapter they have to read in the book. So think if you can do some sort of exercise that relates to course content where you're getting where they are before you get to them. So write in your notes right now, is there anything like that that you can think of? Just take a minute. I'm not going to call on you. I just want you to think. I call this P2R, pause to reflect. Any ideas?
So I typically teach psychology and sort of intro to psych classes. And my idea was kind of make up a disorder or choose a particular psychological disorder and then ask them how they would treat it. Because the first class we tend to talk about different systems throughout the history of psychology and how they've treated different disorders. So like behavioral therapies, cognitive therapies. So sort of describe in like a sentence that particular therapy and say of those, how would you treat this disorder?
And break them up into groups to discuss it
and
first?
have them discuss it.
And then
present
report
it.
back?
Yeah.
Great.
I'm in art history, and one of the challenges I've had with students coming into the class is the assumption that art is an illustration, and that's it, versus like a kind of historical like object that can be unpacked in different ways. So I thought one way to maybe get them to come to this realization that there's more going on than it just illustrates stuff they already know would be to have them think about what art will look like in like 2075. To try and imagine like the unimaginable in a sense. And get that like the subject matter, the form, all of it is historically contingent.
And what kind of things do you think they would come up with?
I mean, I could see them then, for example, like thinking about technology and like, you know, an entire move away from painting and sculpture and, you know, the work of art is just going to be a hologram, you know, and so that will help them realize that the actual medium is part of the object too.
Great. Anybody else?
I teach climate knowledge and climate change. So I could ask them to imagine how changing climate would impact their life, which could be my parents are going to move to Florida or
Move from Florida.
move from Florida, underwater.
So I'm teaching social psychology this next semester, and my idea is to reflect on the versions of yourself and how you're different in different situations, and maybe challenge them to think about, are there ways that you adapt? I'm sure people will say, well, I'm the same in every situation, and I think I would share with them, because social psychology is all about the situation versus personality psychology, which is all about the person. I would say, you know what, I consider myself a pacifist, but if you mess with my kids, I'm going to get violent.
So this is another idea, which is you write scenarios. So this is what I would recommend for those. So write 2 or 3 different scenarios. If you want them to understand different ways in which their reaction would be contextual based, like this. So I'd write different scenarios. Just don't say anything. You don't introduce it. Just say we're just going to discuss some things here, and then break them up into groups, and have them write down some notes, and you can even have them report with some reactions on a Google Doc or whatever, and then you give them the second scenario, and then have them react to that, and then discuss the reactions to both at the same time, because you might give away some of what the lesson you're trying to teach by discussing after the first one.
Sure.
So I would do both at once, or 3, or whatever, and so have them discuss and realize that way. I have a colleague who does a quiz on the first day of class, and it's the basic, it's not graded, but he asked them to identify relevant people, institutions, it's all about the environment, and he collects it, and then it's all the material that he covers in the semester, and then he hands it back to them at the end of the semester, and they get to see how much they've learned. If you're teaching for the first time, you can't do that, because your syllabus, your course material is going to just unfold, and you've got to give yourself that break. But I think that's also clever. His purpose in doing that, it's not a waste of time, it's for them, it's A, he wants to see what they know, and also it's a humbling experience for them to see, also what they've learned. So those are some exercises. You can, I do not think you can ask students to read an article before the first day of class. Even graduate students, they're working, they're moving, so I think you can give them, you can also, if in a block class, you can give them an article, show a 20-minute video, and then break it up into discussions. But make sure it's integrated into your curriculum. It shouldn't be busy work. It should be some idea that you're trying to either get them to begin to understand before, or you want to know what they know. Something where you bring them back together. Give them a chance to digest it in small groups, because not everyone's going to feel comfortable speaking to the whole group, but then come back together so that you can do some learning opportunity. I sometimes in a block, there's like a excerpt of a 45-minute excerpt of a film I'll show, because it's fits with the course material and we come back to it. So the main thing to engender in that first day is what Chris Palmer was talking about, which is that you care about them, you will see them, and that you care about learning, and that you're excited for learning. If you're terrified to walk in, which I totally understand, I remember the first class I ever taught, and I looked down at the student's notebook and it said the name of the course. And I'm so grateful that I was in the right classroom. That's your statement. And so I always start the first class by saying, this is, what the name of the course is. If you're in the wrong class, feel free to leave now. Right? Because I've had students stay the whole class period, and then they were in the wrong class. So, any other questions or comments?
General question, nobody answered the more specific question. It is, like, given my limited experience in teaching, it's a question actually for everybody. If there is one thing that you would not do so that your life is simpler and you still teach, like, for instance, in the one class I taught, I made amazing PowerPoint, in the sense that I spent a lot of time choosing the right color palette, and they were beautiful. And that really did not really enhance the learning experience of the students, but it was a good sink of time for me. Is there some suggestions that you tell me, you shouldn't do that, you should rather focus on something else?
That's a big question. I would say, especially what we know about students, which, if you think about the environment in which our students are growing up, everything is interactive. Everything that, CNN's definition of news is they poll people and then they report what the polling is. Okay, that's news. That's not when I was growing up, that wasn't news. So what I would say is to spend more time, you have to know your content. But I would think about, again, it goes back to intentions. Don't think about teaching. Think about student learning. Think about, what do my students need to learn? And I would think about active learning exercises. And that's another workshop I do on other occasions. And I have a couple of handouts left over from that, and I brought that folder if anyone wants 10 active learning exercises. Anyone want that? So,
can I just share one thing? I attended your active learning techniques workshop last year, and it was my favorite workshop ever. So, I used almost all those exercises, and they went great. So, guys, I highly recommend it.
So, do you have more than one there? Okay. Yeah. So,
could you post that somewhere?
Yes, I will post the active learning. So, what I would say is, be realistic for yourself. Okay, there's only so much you can do when you're new, and give yourself the break of a mid-semester evaluation. All right, so I also have a mid-semester evaluation. I can post that. So what am I posting? The mid-semester evaluation, and
you mean the students evaluating?
Yes, yes. and active learning. I've already posted a bunch of things. The student information sheet, I think I posted that already.
It's a really minor question about the mid-semester evaluations, because I worry about them worrying about it being anonymous or not, because I can see their handwriting. Is there any way to do that on Blackboard and make an anonymous post or something?
You can, there is a way to do it. There's also something called Poll Everywhere.
Okay.
Do you know about Poll Everywhere?
I've been using Qualtrics.
Okay, so I don't know, but you can use Poll Everywhere.
SurveyMonkey, Google.
Or SurveyMonkey, up to, each of them has a limit, but CTRL will help you
Okay,
with
but
that.
I'm going to do it
So,
that way, I think.
what I would, Valentina, to answer your question is, I'm much more into active learning, and what our students, a lot of it's an emotional thing. They'll work for me. Think about this. People always say, our students don't read. Well, they stayed up all night reading Harry Potter, right?
Yes.
And the Hunger Games. So they'll read if they care about it. So if you pick interesting readings, if it's realistic amount of reading, as opposed to, sorry, I have to model that. If students start to speak in your class, don't let them get away with it, because they do it one day, and no, I just have to do that. So then they're going to do it the next day. So that's what I mean by model. However you want the students to act in class, you have to own it and say, but I try to do it in ways, usually I say, I just need to know what you're talking about, because I have to know what everybody's saying. So because if you have a question, someone else probably has the same question.
Well, probably, yeah, my question is how to get to the
Blackboard site. So but the thing is, I didn't do that. I tried not to do it in a shaming way. I did it in a kind of friendly way. But you gotta model. But you have to be tough at first. You can always get easier. You cannot be easy and then get tougher. Okay. So, but active learning would be the one thing I would say to do. And and as much as possible, where you are lecturing, to quote cover material. If it's in the textbook, then why are you lecturing on it? Because what have you just done? You've either told the student not to do the reading, because you're going to tell them what's in the reading, or you've told them don't bother coming to class if you've done the reading, because you're going to be bored.
So you ask them to read the material before they come to class?
Absolutely. And then I create exercises or assignments to hold them accountable for that material. And I call on them. But if they haven't done, So Patty, tell it, so what did you think of what, Kendi had to say on that question of, historical foundations of race? You didn't get to the reading today? It's all right. Maybe next time. So, Valentina, what did you think about Kendi had to say? It's not about shaming. It's about holding them accountable. And so that is really what I do. And I do in-class writing assignments, which count towards the participation grade. I'll make sure I think I've already put the participation rubric up there. I will also put my course policies up there, just for those who missed the first workshop. All right, we've covered a lot of material today, so I would just go around. How are you feeling right now? Really fast. We're gonna one thing that's great to do is again about accountability. It's on your active learning sheets. I will do the super sentence is a great one. You've covered a bunch of material. You asked that you'll see it. But I'm going to just hold us accountable, which is and just the whole idea here was about teaching and learning. But I covered a lot of material, and it was not coherent because I gave up my prepared points because I saw a small group initially. It got bigger, but I also thought it had been a long day, and we might just do what you felt the needs for. So if you didn't feel like you got your questions answered, I'm happy to talk. But how are you feeling right now?
Good.
I feel like I need to sleep on it, and then come back once it's not so overwhelming to really make decisions.
Yeah, I'm a little anxious, right?
Yeah, definitely learn something, but very overwhelmed and anxious as every year. There is so much interesting stuff and great stuff that people are doing, and they want to use all of it, but it kind of becomes the whole purpose.
So I'm going to interrupt right now. I encourage you to take 5 minutes and write now, before you lose it. And I encourage you to just think, what's one thing I learned today that I can incorporate into my classes? Just one.
Oh, that's good.
All right.
Can I just say what I learned today?
No, I asked you how you feel.
I feel like I have more clarity.
Good. I feel like there are a lot of things to do. I'm having the same situation as, I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
Marina.
Oh, Marina. Yeah, that like, I need to figure out what I'm gonna incorporate when.
All right. Set priorities. You can't do everything this semester. Try one thing.
I feel better about what I'm doing the first day of my first block class that I learned.
Feel challenged.
I feel better in that I have some resources that I can tap into, so I feel more prepared than I did.
I feel like I need to just go home and like organize my notes to figure out exactly what I'm doing.
I feel rather daunted in thinking about how I'm going to organize a lower level introductory survey course it'll be somewhere between a mix of discussion and lecture, and I feel like I have to rethink what I'm also doing for the first time.
Talk to your colleagues who've taught that class if you can. Lots of little assignments, holding them accountable, and especially if you can do them on Blackboard where it's multiple choice, so that it's graded by Blackboard and not you. Because you're going to get, and you can blame it on Make It Stick. Which is a great book about the more frequent testing means students remember more.
I feel like I can do a much better job in the first lecture, which is why I was there. So
Good. More confident.
Yeah, I feel fortified. I feel like I had some ideas. I feel more confident about those. I feel more intentional, and I'm excited.
Great. Well, thank you all for playing. Thank you for playing along as sort of we meandered our way. We covered way more than the first day of class. But that is what you needed. And so I thank you for, if anyone was frustrated, for those of you who are linear thinkers who want the agenda and came just for that, that's going to frustrate people. Just recognize that. So you can't teach everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.